What's up? Welcome back to The Manager with Gianni Frangella by Outlier Sports. It's been a couple weeks. I was on vacation for a week, out of the country actually, and just couldn't get stuff done there. And I was going to do something yesterday, but I'm sure you can hear, I am ill. I am sick. Doing a lot better today, but yesterday was pretty rough. But without further ado, got a lot of NBA stuff to talk about, and that's really what this is going to be today. For full disclosure, this podcast won't always be only basketball, but right now, that's what is going on. There's some baseball stuff going on too, but that's just not what I'm going to talk about today. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about, big trade. Desmond Bane is traded from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Orlando Magic in exchange for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, a 26 swap between Phoenix, Washington, and Orlando, and I believe that swap is for the second best pick of those three. Still a pretty good pick if you can count on Phoenix and Washington to probably be bad next year. The 16th overall pick in this year's draft, a 28 and 2030 unprotected first-round picks, and a 2029 swap that is top two protected. All in all, 4 unprotected first-round picks, a swap, Cole Anthony, KCP from Desmond Bane. Wow, man. Wow. Came out of left field, completely, unexpected. I think, maybe there had been some murmurs about Desmond Bane potentially being up for trade, but definitely nobody expected a trade like this to happen. The overwhelming reaction to it is that Orlando got fleeced and they paid way too much for Desmond Bane, and that's kind of the overwhelming sentiment from people. However, there's two ways to look at this trade, in my opinion. You have to look at it for what it does for Orlando right now. Desmond Bane is a substantial upgrade over what KCP was giving you last year. And not to mention KCP was on a pretty bad contract. Getting him off alone was a win. Losing Cole Anthony off the bench isn't great, but you got better in the now. You got better short term looking at next season for 2026. The Magic are going to be better, and it's going to be a very weak Eastern Conference considering Boston's not going to be in it with Tatum out. I highly doubt Milwaukee's going to be in it considering Dame's going to be out. So that really leaves you with New York, Indiana, Cleveland, and now Orlando. Maybe Philadelphia gets their stuff together, but I wouldn't count it. If I was Orlando right now, I'd feel comfortable being in that top 4 tier. However, I would not go as far as to say that it puts them over any of those teams. I think so much has to be proven with Orlando. There's still a lot of young guys, and this team in several years has had trouble staying healthy. So there's a lot that needs to be proven out of Orlando still. But I think Desmond Bane's going to be a great fit for them. They needed three-point shooting. They were dead last in the league in three-point percentage and three-point makes. So that's a great way to fix that. And plus, he's pretty decent at moving the ball around. I think it's going to fit great in their system. But the other way of looking at this is you traded 4 first-round picks and a swap. And might I note that one of those swaps is immensely valuable because if you're going to get the second best pick between Phoenix, Washington, and Orlando, that's likely a lottery pick at the least, and maybe a top 5, top 10 pick. So that's a lot to give away on top of, 3 other unprotected first-round picks in a swap in addition to that. And you're giving all that up for a guy who's never been an all-star. He could be an all-star in the East, weak Eastern Conference, but he's never been an all-star. And really, this is the kind of trade you make when you're knocking on the door of taking the conference or winning a title. Like, this is a trade you make when you lose late in the second round or in the conference finals, and you're right there. And these past few years have shown that you just need one more piece. Orlando hasn't gotten that far. Orlando's way beyond, or way behind being knocking on the door, in my opinion. They're not comfortably contending every year to make this kind of trade and assume that it's going to leap you to the top. And some people would say, oh, well, it might take some time. This is a win now type of trade. And I'm not saying that if they don't win the title next year, it's a complete bust, because to be honest, it's kind of an unrealistic expectation. But this is a win now type of trade. You just gave up, the vast majority of your good draft capital for the next 5-6 years. You're trying to win now. You're not trying to invest and build. You're trying to win right now. So it may take some time, but I don't think that's really, I don't think that's really what Orlando wants from this trade. They don't want it to take time. They want to win next year. And I don't see that happening. Barring, Bane's an unbelievably good fit and a completely, skyrockets the ceiling of the team. I just don't see them being good enough from last year to this year, making that big of a leap just because of Desmond Bane to, take the conference or win the finals. That just seems unrealistic to me. But then again, like I said, the East is wide open. I would still take Cleveland, New York, and Indiana over them, but it's possible that they could beat those teams. I mean, we haven't seen this team on the court yet, so we don't know. But my opinion from day one when the trade happened is that I think Orlando is kind of disastrous of a trade, in my opinion, just because I don't think Bane's worth that much. And, sometimes it's not about what a guy is worth in general. It's about how much they can affect and be valuable to your team. That's a fair point to make if you're making the case that Orlando made a good trade. But I just think there's so much more that needs to be done for Orlando before they win a title. The guys they have on their team, one, they need to grow. They need to stay healthy, but they need to develop more. Paolo's great. He's an incredible player, but likely he probably has to go even one more notch up if you're going to win the finals. And beyond that, as the years go on, you'll probably need to fully get this roster complete. You need depth. You need a full roster of a bench of guys that do this role, do that role. And I don't know if Orlando's quite there yet just by adding one shooter. So I think it's going to make them better for sure. I don't know if it's going to really give them what they want in the immediate, they're not going to have immediate success in terms of, winning a title or taking the conference or anything. That's at least my opinion. I just don't see that for them. And I think this was a bit of an overpay and a jump the gun type of move. But who knows? You got to give them credit that they're going to be better now, and that getting KCP off of their team and getting that contract off is a huge win. But man, they gave up a lot of draft capital to get it done. But moving on from Orlando, look at the other side of this trade with Memphis. I felt like maybe I'd seen a rumor or two that they may be shopping Bane or some of their guys, but it was never like a big, everyone knows this is happening. And so now it's made everyone beg the question, does it end here? Are they willing to move on from Jaren Jackson Jr., maybe even John Morant? They're going to have a new head coach. He coached the last, 4 weeks of the season for Memphis. But he's a new coach. He's a new guy. And so they're retooling. This trade with Bane is signaling that they're retooling. And getting all this draft capital, it doesn't condemn you to being to rebuilding. You could just be a good team with a lot of draft capital. But it opens that door for them to maybe move on from Jaren Jackson, move on from John Morant, and get even more draft capital and enter the full rebuild button and kind of follow the formula that we've seen from not Orlando, Oklahoma City and Utah, and all these teams that are, they stockpile all these picks as they go into the rebuild by sending their stars off. We've seen it work for OKC. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for Memphis if they tried this, or it doesn't mean it's going to work for Utah or anybody else that's trying this method. But it's a good method to have, because in today's league with this CBA, you need to draft well. And the best way to do that is to have, the best way to make shots is to shoot the most amount of shots, for lack of a better expression. So if they can get more picks for those guys and really hit the rebuild button, I think it'd be interesting to see. But there's a very, I think the likely possibility is that they take what they got from this Bane trade, add a guy or whatever in the offseason and try and contend next year. I don't really think they will, but that's probably going to be their mindset, or what their goal is. But maybe they also use this vast amount of draft capital that they've acquired to get someone else, to get another guy and improve their team even more. They have a lot of options, Memphis does. I've seen a lot of mock trades for Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant. Most of them are horrible, and just fans who, want to get the guy in their team for nothing, as per usual NBA fans are. But, the possibility is intriguing, but I don't really see anything happening there. Especially not John Morant. Maybe something with Jaren Jackson Jr., but they're not going to move on from Ja. In fact, I think them firing Taylor Jenkins was basically them picking Ja over Jenkins, and it would make no sense to then get rid of him after you got this new coach that Ja isn't supportive. So, they might be hitting the sell button, but I think they probably stop it here. Next topic we're going to talk about is the finals, because when I last made this video, the finals had not begun yet. And my prediction, if you remember, was Oklahoma City in 6 games, and I said they were going to do it by making Indiana turn the ball over. It's pretty good. It's not over yet. Game 6 is tonight. But I don't know. I think that Game 4 was just so devastating of a loss for Indiana. And going into that game, I felt that game was practically a Game 7 in the way that I felt whoever won that game was then going to win the series. And it was pretty easy to explain that theory. Indiana goes up 3-1. Only one other team in history has ever come back from 3-1. So odds are significantly in your favor at that point if you go up 3-1. And I felt like Game 5 was going to go to Oklahoma City either way. That's why I felt like Game 4 was so important for Indiana to win, because now you got to win in 7. But on the flip side, OKC took that game, and then they have all the momentum, and it's a best-of-3 series with 2 of the last 3 games at home, if it even goes to 7. So they blew that game, and in my opinion, blew the series. And the way they blew that game was just so bad, too. I mean, they didn't have a field goal the last 3.5 minutes of the game. You could say what you want about the push-off, which we'll get to that later. You could say what you want about the push-off with SGA and maybe some of the questionable calls, but at the end of the day, they blew that game. SGA having a couple questionable calls go his way didn't make Indiana, not score the last 3 minutes and 20 seconds of the game. That's on them. That's on them straying from what their offense and what their team identity has been all year long, and it's team basketball, moving the ball, being team-oriented, getting everybody involved. And then in the last 3.5 minutes of that game, they went pure hero ball. Let Hallie cook. Do his ass. Like, that's literally what they reverted to. And it made no sense why they would do that, given this system of playing team basketball has gotten you up 2-1 and a quarter away from going up 3-1 in the finals. You doing that all year long, and then you stray away from it, and it costs you the game and probably the series. But the thing was about that push-off, too, with SGA, I do think it was a push-off. I think it should have been called where Nesmith fell. You take that call away, I still think Oklahoma City wins that game. Just the way it was going. He was having an incredible fourth quarter. He probably would have made another shot to make up for that if it got called off anyways. I do think it was a push-off. Should have been called, but you can't take away from a 15-point fourth quarter that SGA had. He was dominant, heroic in that fourth quarter, and he won them that game. And if you take that shot away, I get the argument that maybe, because that put him up one, I get the argument that maybe the momentum swing of if they called that on Shea and then the momentum swings back to Indiana, I can get that theory. But at the end of the day, Indiana pissed down their leg in that fourth quarter. They blew it so bad. And, you can say what you want about the refs. They lost that game. The refs didn't help OKC win. OKC outright won that game, and Indiana choked it. There's no other way to look at it. And so now we go into Game 6 where Haliburton's injury status is, up in the air. I don't think anything has been said yet. I believe he's still questionable. And coming off a just absolutely nightmarish Game 5. And I know a lot of people are going to say he was hurt, and he was hurt. And I'm not trying to come down on a guy who's injured and trying to play through for his team. But if that's all you can offer, if you can't make a field goal, if you can't make one field goal, while playing through injury, then just sit down. Sit down, because you're not helping your team at all. If anything, you're holding them back, and I really think he did in that Game 5. And I'm not saying that if he doesn't play or whatever, they win, because, ultimately just a lot of different things went wrong by different players. Nembhard had a disastrous fourth quarter in Game 5. But, 0 field goals made. You can't make one shot. I'm sorry. If you can't make one shot, you got to sit out. And I think that's something he has to consider about tonight. Because I know he wants to go out there and play for his team and his city and everything. And, of course, people are going to be, if he doesn't play, if he knows he's not ready and he doesn't play, there's going to be people who give him a lot of shit for it. But if you have to take into account, if I can't make a real contribution, a real positive contribution to my team, then I can't go out there. He has to have that in mind. And the trainers and anybody who clears him to play has to have that in mind as well, And I remember, I'm a Nuggets fan, I remember Game 7 against Oklahoma City, Aaron Gordon, they said it was going to take him 2 to 3 weeks to recover from the strain. I'm like, of course he's not going to play. And when it said he was playing, I was really nervous about him having a much bigger injury, which is very relevant with Haliburton as well because it's a calf strain. I was very worried about him having a much bigger injury, but my concern was also how useful can you be if you're moving around like this. And I thought Aaron Gordon was actually better than some of our healthier players in that Game 7. Obviously we got blown out, but he you can't look at that game and say, oh well, he was hurt and that's why we lost. He was good. He was getting a bunch of rebounds. Like, he did his job on one hamstring. So if Haliburton can give you that similar type of effect where they're not full strength, they're not playing like themselves, but they can still get in there and make positive impacts on the game, then you throw them out there. I remember one thing I said to someone I was talking about the series earlier with. If Haliburton can't score that well, but he can go out there and give you 11 or 12 assists tonight, that's huge. That's huge, and I think you can win a game off that easily. So maybe it's just about how he goes about it. But you can't have him make no field goals and not, make up for it substantially with his passing and assist numbers, because he's giving you nothing at that point. And I can't imagine he's going to be too helpful in defense if he's got a calf strain. So it's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing because if you're Haliburton, you may never make it back to this point. And so sitting out this game could haunt you. You could think for the rest of your life, what if I played? And, what if I played and we won the game and we won the series and what if I never get back there? It's truly a torturous position to be in. But at the same time, he has to consider, what if I go out there and lose it for my team? Lose my team's only chance to win a championship because I, just had to be out there and I held my team back. It's an impossible situation to be in, and it's really difficult, and I feel for him. But he's got to, somehow, some way, he's got to figure out what the right decision is. And if he goes out there, you got to hope that he can give you something. He cannot go out there and do what he did in Game 5. He simply cannot. They will lose. So we'll see what happens. But all in all, pretty happy with my prediction about OKC in 6 and it coming at the hand of them forcing turnovers. So I know a thing or two every now and then. Next, I want to talk about the Lakers sale. Pretty wild news. Just, I don't think anybody really knew the Buss family was considering selling any of their stake. And it's crazy to think about when you consider how long this family's owned them and the importance of when Dr. Jerry Buss bought them in 79 and built, made the Showtime Lakers. And it was one of those things where from the top to the bottom, the way he ran his team that he owned was a huge part of how they had that success. It marks a new era for the Lakers. And I'm a Dodgers fan, and this guy, Mark Walter, who bought the Lakers, he owns the Dodgers as well. And I would say as a fan of the Dodgers, I can speak highly of the guy and his commitment to winning and paying top dollar to, put the right players in the field and win a World Series and be competitive every year. He does all that. However, in the NBA, it's worth noting that you can't just write whatever check you want. There's hard rules about your limits on how much money you can spend and who you can offer it to. And there are cases like Boston where these people are, miles and miles into the luxury tax and over the second apron. However, it's worth noting that they are severely limited in the type of transactions and trades and pickups they can make because of, how far into the cap they are. You can't, it's not baseball. You can't just write whatever check you want. There is a real consequence to it. And if that was the case, because I've seen a lot of Lakers fans being like, oh, we got the big bucks now, we're going to write the real checks. I don't think that's entirely the case, because if that was, Steve Ballmer, his net worth blows Mark Walters just completely out of the water by $100 billion. And you can't say, oh, well, Steve Ballmer's not as committed to winning. I mean, that guy will pay whatever it takes to win basketball games, to make a better environment for the fans, for the team, for the players to win. And so you can't claim that, oh, he's just not committed enough. He's more arguably the most committed owner of anybody in the NBA. And so if it was as simple as, well, he can write whatever check he wants to get whatever player he wants, the Clippers would have done that in a way that guarantees a championship. Because he's got so much more. I mean, he's the richest owner in sports. So if it was that simple, the Clippers would have done that. But frankly, in basketball, I don't, even if it was pay whatever check, or write whatever check you want, I don't think it would be that simple. Because it comes down to how guys fit with each other, their coach, their play styles, etc. It's so much more than paying whatever you want to get whatever player you want. But this is a huge thing for the Lakers because, a lot of Lakers fans in recent years have been critical of Jeannie Buss's ownership and her role as the owner, how she manages the front office. A lot of people think this signals that Rob Pelinka is going to be out as the Lakers GM. And I agree. He's had less than a perfect tenure as a GM. However, the guy just traded for Luka Doncic. He's not the worst GM in the world. And you look, and I know he traded Anthony Davis, but you look at Desmond Bane and all these guys going for 1 million first-round picks to only have to give up 1 first-round pick, even though you gave up AD, it's impressive. So you got to give him credit for that. I'm not saying that means you have to let him keep his job, but you have to give him credit for just an incredible negotiation of getting Luka Doncic on the Lakers. So, his job is a little bit in flux given the transition of ownership, just because we simply don't know what Mark Walter, what his initiative is going to be and how he wants to go about that. We don't know it. We know that about how he does it with the Dodgers, but it's so different in the NBA with the way the rules are, the money is. It's hard to look at it and say, well, he'll just do this here. You can look at a lot of the things that he does with the Dodgers, such as just organizational structure, and say that he'll bring that to the Lakers, which I do think would be helpful for the Lakers. But $10 billion. Wow. I remember when the Broncos sold for $4 billion, and that was seen as I think at the time, that was the biggest sale in all of sports. And here we are a few years later, and we're at $10 billion. It's nuts how quickly this stuff ramps up. But if you're a Lakers fan, I think, you got to be excited. Because this guy, if you're a Lakers fan, you're likely a Dodgers fan as well. And you know what he brings to the Dodgers just from his commitment to the team. So that'll be good for the Lakers. Will be interesting to see where they go from there. And also, what ideologies he holds about basketball and whether or not he gets involved in that department. Because, Matt Ishbia, the new Suns owner, came on, and a lot of Suns fans were very excited because he's committed to the team, wanted to pay top dollar. And since then, his influence on, let's trade for KD, let's trade for Bradley Beal, building a super team has completely derailed and destroyed what the Suns' success was in recent years before he came along. So, we don't know what Mark Walter's initiative is basketball-wise and what his ideology is, or whether or not he's going to stand back and let the front office and everyone else do their jobs, or if he's going to be involved in a way that Matt Ishbia is, that from what we've seen has been disastrous. It could work out better than that, but we don't know. But moving on, Kevin Durant, a lot of trade news in that area. Kevin Durant is almost guaranteed to not play for the Phoenix Suns. I would say it pretty much is a guarantee at this point. He's not going to play for the Phoenix Suns next year. And the recent developments in his trade buzz is that he has said he does not want to go to Minnesota, who's been trying to trade, looking at getting him. And his preferred destinations are the Spurs, the Rockets, and the Miami Heat. Now, personally, I'm not even entirely sure what Miami's package would be, considering they don't want to give up Bam or Tyler Hero. I mean, can you really base a trade package for KD? Can the best player in that package that you get back be Terry Rozier or Jaime Jaquez? I wouldn't want that, personally, if I'm Phoenix. But maybe they give you a lot of draft capital. But personally, in my opinion, I don't get why Kevin Durant wants to go to Miami. I mean, I don't think their team is good enough to survive. We don't know what the trade package would be. They could just give them a bunch of picks, but I don't think the roster is good enough to survive trading for KD and then contending. And frankly, even if you just plopped KD onto the roster as it is now, I would still be pretty skeptical about their contender status, just given that what we've seen in the last few years with KD, he's playing terrific, but that doesn't grant you contender status. It just doesn't. He's not to say not to rag on him, say, oh, he's not good enough, but you need more than just adding Kevin Durant on there. And the way this season went for Miami, I don't look at them and say they're just a Kevin Durant away from taking the East and being the favorites or whatever. Granted, like I mentioned with Orlando earlier, this is going to be a very weak Eastern Conference, so there is some opportunity out there. But to say I don't want to go to Minnesota, but then want Miami, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think Minnesota is a much more favorable trade destination, in my opinion. But if I were him, I would really just want to go to either San Antonio or Houston, and primarily I'd want to go to the Spurs to play alongside Wemby. I think there's something, not that KD values this given what we've seen, but I do think there's something to going to a place and helping them, do the heavy lifting to get to the playoffs versus going to a team like Houston that's, all the heavy lifting has already been done. Now, clearly his history shows that KD doesn't value that tremendously. But if I were him, I would want to go to San Antonio, a place where his addition gets you over the top versus going to Houston and all the work's already done for you. But going to San Antonio, playing alongside Wemby, which I think would be tremendous for Wemby, having KD as a mentor, given their play styles from the perimeter. They're both tall, long guys who can dribble and shoot. That'd be huge for Wemby. But also, I just think they'd be a really good team. I wasn't a huge fan of them going with Nick Johnson as their head coach with the other options out there, especially considering, it's not like the guy proved a whole lot to you as under his tenure. They weren't winning a bunch of games. I don't really see what he proved to earn that job, in my opinion, over available candidates like Mike Brown, Mike Malone, Taylor Jenkins. I don't know. I felt like there were better options out there. Even some of those assistant guys that float around the league. Like, why didn't they interview Jordan Knapp or Johnny Bryant? I don't know. His Pop went with his guy, I guess. But I think Kevin Durant on that team, they have a lot of draft capital to not have to give up a whole lot of their actual players. If you can keep Castle, Wemby, obviously you're not going to trade Wemby. I don't even know why I said that. But if you can keep Castle and have KD come onto that team, that's a playoff team, in my opinion. Even in the West, I think that's a playoff team. Houston, you add KD to that team. It depends on what you give up. They have a lot of draft capital as well. I think if you can hold on to Şengün and Amen Thompson and add KD, that team's scary. That team is scary. I don't know if I'd quite put them as favorites or anything like that yet, just because the rest of that team is still so inexperienced, and we saw it in the Golden State series. And we don't even know how good they'll be next year. Sacramento made it to the 3 seed a couple of years ago, and everybody was like, and it kind of felt very similar to Houston, where it's like, all right, well, they're here now. This is going to be, they're going to be a consistent playoff team, and then they, have completely fallen out of line since. I don't think they didn't make the playoffs last few years since. So that's a real possibility for Houston. I'm not trying to wish that evil on them, but it's a possibility that they don't get back to where they got to now. It's hard to. But if they add KD, they'd probably get back. And with Minnesota, I don't really know what they'd give up, because Randall's a free agent, I'm pretty sure, and so is Naz Reid, and you don't really want to trade Naz Reid anyway. So I don't, if I'm Phoenix, I just don't have a whole lot of interest in any player that you can give me from over there. And they don't have draft capital to really throw, a vast amount of it to throw at you, because they traded 4 first-round picks to get Rudy Gobert. So I just don't even know what they can offer. I think if I'm KD, I would want to go to Minnesota, because I think if you can go there without them giving up a bunch of people, you're, arguably the second favorite in the West besides OKC. That would be my opinion. I don't know how they get him there, but if Minnesota could get KD without gutting their team, I would very much want to go there if I'm KD. And frankly, I don't know why he doesn't want to. Maybe he doesn't believe they can get him without gutting the team. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. People have been saying, it's about to happen soon. It's going to happen soon. It really could happen any day now. The draft is in a week from now. I believe it's the 25th is when it starts. So I got to imagine it happens before then, because if you're San Antonio, your package very likely has to revolve around these draft picks. Or maybe you draft a guy and then you trade him to Phoenix after the fact. You can do that as well, but if you're San Antonio, you're not going to get KD without giving up either one of Castle or whoever you pick at the second round pick, or just the pick itself. You're not going to get him without giving up one of those two. So if you're San Antonio, you're on a bit of a deadline to get KD. If you're Houston, I would imagine you definitely want to use draft assets to get him, so you probably want to do it before the draft. Miami's not as in big of a rush, but I don't know. I think it's got to happen soon. So we'll see what happens there. Could be very interesting. Next, I want to talk about. I mentioned earlier I was going to talk about this SGA Push-off Dilemma. Now, I don't want to come off as sour grapes because I'm a Nuggets fan, and frankly, I'm rooting for Indiana in this series. And maybe this is sour grapes, but I just think it's a little ridiculous to me that he does this every single time. And in a couple of these finals games, it hasn't even been like a little chicken wing, a little kind of necessary contact. It's been full on shoving you back, stiff arming you. And when you shove a guy 3 feet back, I don't know how you could have possibly be expected to recover from that as a defender. I don't know what the refs expect these defenders to do. But my thing is, it has not been called on him once these finals, and probably not even once these playoffs. If I'm wrong on that, by all means, please correct me. Tell me what, go in the comments. I will put out a correction. I'll literally come out and say, I was wrong. I said this and I was wrong. But I genuinely don't think I've seen him be called for that once in these playoffs. And it's a thing of Jokic, he backs people down a lot. And a lot of people say he gets away with offensive fouls because he throws these elbow rounds, these chicken wings. And sometimes he does. But he gets called for it sometimes. He gets away with it a good bit, but he does get called for it. SGA has not been called for this push-off once. Not once. And, it's ridiculous to me. It's unfair, in my opinion, for those trying to guard him and trying to play the game, because how could you possibly recover from that? And I genuinely think, though, you're going to see a shift in this next season, because this whole push-off thing, people knew that he does that. It's kind of his move. But it has been put on full display, national TV, here in these playoffs and in these finals. And I think the repercussions of that is next season, you're going to see a lot of guards throw this little chicken wing out to try and get this shot off, this little push off. And one of two things is either going to come of it. The NBA is either going to, do away with the push-off call entirely and just stop calling it on people, even though it's in the rule book, or they're going to start calling it on all those other people and maybe start calling it on Shea, and it's going to bring to light how egregious some of these push-offs were in these finals and in these playoffs. And I don't want to take away from the player, say that to take away from the player that SGA is, because he's incredible. He is the MVP. He deserved it. And some of the stuff he's done in this finals is just, elite S-tier stuff. And I applaud him. I think he's undeniably top 3 player in the league. And if they win this finals, he's going to have a very good case for the best player in the world. And he's the first player this decade, if they go on to win, he's going to be the first player this decade to win MVP and finals MVP in the same season. That's incredible. You got to give him all the credit in the world. He's an incredible player. And especially that Game 4, fourth quarter, I mean, that was just vintage. I think that's going to be the moment that, at least in my mind, that's going to be the moment that people look back at this series and they think of that moment of him taking over, saving his team with the season on the line, basically. And that's going to be his iconic finals moment, barring something even more impressive tonight or in a Game 7. So I'm not taking away from him and everything that he's done. He's an incredible player. But I do think it's a little nuts that he hasn't been called for one of these push-offs. And I think he should be called for one of them because some of them are a little egregious. And that's, again, not to take away from him. You know, Jokic backs people down aggressively, throws his elbows around and doesn't get called for it. Giannis puts his shoulder into people a lot, and some people think he should be called for it. That's just, every great player has something about them that, you know, you complain about and you think the ref should come down on. But the one difference I will say is Jokic and Giannis, they do occasionally get a call for that. SGA does not. That's all I'm saying. You got to throw one of these calls in there, please. Moving on. This is basically my last topic. It's kind of a doubleheader of a topic. This has been a great final series. I think a lot better than everyone has expected. And it's being done a major injustice by ESPN and the NBA. And ESPN is easily more at fault here because, I mean, the coverage is it's been baffling how bad it is. And obviously everyone saw Stephen A. Smith on playing solitaire during live action of the NBA Finals, just being disrespectful. But more than that, they're getting up there in First Take every day and they're talking about nonsense. In the midst of the NBA Finals, he's talking about the crime rate in Memphis. He's talking about, you know, LeBron James and ring culture and all this stuff. I mean, it's just, talk about the games. Talk about the games. And Haliburton, like, he had that thing with Haliburton where he comes down on him. He's basically talking smack to him. He's like, much greater players than you have tried to come at me. He's diminishing, you know, a budding young star in the midst of an NBA Finals. How is that like? That looks so bad for the NBA. And it's just like the face of the NBA's leading partner is doing this, is talking down upon. He thinks he's bigger and better than the actual players, that his job is to cover and talk about them. Without them, he doesn't have a job. And it's truly disgusting. And I have a lot of respect for Stephen A. Smith in the sense that he worked very hard to get where he's been, and he's, you know, in a lot of ways been a pioneer for sports journalism. But I mean, describing his coverage of these finals as anything other than, you know, just a failure and a total disappointment and a disgrace for the NBA it'd be incorrect to describe it as anything else. And I truly fear for the NBA's future with ESPN being their lead partner and this guy being such a big face in the NBA media coverage. Although I do think with NBC coming on next year and Amazon coming on next year, there poses hope for the NBA's coverage because, you know, we don't know what that's going to be like, but I'm very much hoping it's going to be about the actual basketball games, not about the drama, not about the trade rumors, not about, you know, all-time ranking discourse and stuff like that. Like, let's just talk about the basketball, the games. Let's talk about the actual basketball. And ESPN has strayed so far away from that, it's unbelievable. And they've basically said emphatically in these last few years that they don't care about talking about actual basketball. And a prime example of this was firing probably their best actual analyst in Zach Lowe or letting him go to give more money to Kendrick Perkins, one of the biggest nonsense spouters in all of sports media. They don't care about giving you the real coverage and giving you real analysis. They want you to get pissed off at what these people say and engagement farm, and they just don't care. They care more about the money than they care about doing right by the sport and by sports journalism. And as an aspiring sports journalist, it's disgusting to me personally. And I guess my issue with the NBA on this part of the finals is the presentation of the NBA finals has plummeted so far from what it used to be. I mean, 10 years ago, you watched an NBA finals game and you felt like you were watching a game that was so much more important and bigger, and it was larger than life compared to these other games. You felt the importance of these games. You don't feel that now. The presentation is gone. For one, ESPN's, and I truly think this is a bigger deal than people realize, ESPN's score bug, the design for the scoreboard, it's ridiculous. It's so minimalistic and it looks terrible, and it feels like you're watching a regular season game. Second of all, there's no finals logo or anything on the court that tells you this is a finals game. There's nothing that makes you feel like this is bigger. They tried that pathetic little logo graphic on the digital graphic, and it was terrible. They ditched it so quickly because it was worse than having nothing on there. And probably my biggest frustration with this, and I'm not saying that, it's simply a matter of fixing the scoreboard and putting a logo on the court. Just the feel of the finals as a whole, the presentation of it from top to bottom feels like a regular season game. It doesn't feel any different. And ESPN's a factor in that, but the NBA, the way they market these guys, the way they market these non-LeBron, KD, Steph players for the finals, it's pathetic. They really only talk about these guys, and it puts the NBA fans in a spot where when that's all you hear about, that's all you talk about, that's all you're interested in. Unless you're a real diehard, nitty-gritty basketball fan, those three guys are really the only people that put your butt in a seat to watch the game. And their failure to market their younger stars, failure to market a 68-win team with the MVP on their team is a joke. And for Adam Silver to get up there about the logo thing, to get up there and say, oh, well, we tried to do people don't realize we took the logos off the court away because people were slipping on the stickers. Well, what is the in-season tournament courts then? Are those stickers, or is it an entirely new court in itself? You have entirely new painted courts for the in-season tournament. You can't put one trophy on the court for the finals? I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm getting pissed off just thinking about it, because like to have this entirely new court for the in-season tournament, and then to get up there and act like the technology eludes you to put a trophy on the court or finals logo on the court. I mean, it's honestly insulting to the NBA fans, because it's like, do you think we're dumb? You think we can't figure out what, like, past your bullshit? And frankly, it's disappointing, because like, I like Silver. I defend him over, some other commissioners. I think he's one of the better commissioners in sports. However, with that being said, it's absolutely ridiculous for him to get up there and act like they can't put a trophy on the court. $1 billion league. You have all this stuff for the in-season tournament. The in-season tournament's like, we can look at this and say, we know you're bullshitting. Like, we know you're lying. But beyond that, to try and act like the technology eludes you to just put a logo, a trophy, or the final script on the court, I mean, it really is insulting to the NBA fans. I'm excited to see the presentation for NBC and Amazon, even though they won't be the finals. But it's really disappointing where it is at right now in terms of finals presentation. And I really hope that Silver looks at this and is receptive of the fans' feedback, not only about the court and the presentation, but about how ridiculously awful the ESPN media has been covering these finals. Don't really have much else to talk about. Got a little ranty, a little fired up there at the end. I'm going to try and do these pods, weekly. I didn't do it this last week because I was on vacation. But I'm going to try and do one next week as well. Hopefully, right in time for the draft. We can do a little draft review. And also, once this season is over, and probably next week, as soon as next week, I will be discussing other sports, other topics beyond just basketball. Basketball is my main thing. It's my favorite sport, and it's what's going on right now, and there's a lot to talk about compared to other sports. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. This is episode 2 of The Manager with Gianni Frangella, brought to you by Outlier Sports. And hope you have a good one. Peace.